Hello and welcome to Cooking the Books with Heather. On this episode, it is once again Muscadine grape season, and we are going to be making Grape-Hull preserves. So I've already done some of the work. Oh, I'm sorry, this is out of Deep Run Roots from Vivian Howard's cookbook. And she's got the whole Muscadine grape section, which we've made several recipes before. I'll link them all somewhere here, probably at the end and maybe below. We'll see. We've already done some of the work here. It's, I think, just sort of the beginning of Muscadine grape season. Some of mine were not super ripe, but this recipe will be fine. When they're ripe enough, they are easier to squeeze the pulp out, which is what we need to do in the beginning. But I saved one to show you guys. So the stem end is usually where it pops open easiest. If it's not popping open very easily, you can use your fingernail if you have them. I don't have great ones, to sort of open it up a little bit and then squeeze. But so you just squeeze it, and all of the pulp and the seeds and the juice will come out. And we want to keep these hulls because we're going to use them in these preserves. So this is supposed to make, okay, I'm making half of a recipe because I just didn't have enough grapes to make the full recipe. Supposedly the full recipe makes 1 pint, which is this, I believe. It seems like it'll make more than that, but you know, we'll see. I think this won't make more than a pint, but I feel like the whole recipe might make more. We'll see. But this is a pretty easy recipe. All I'm trying to do right now is bring this up to a simmer. I've had it on medium heat here for just a little bit. She doesn't say what heat to use for this, so I guessed at a medium. Simmer on my stove is usually a little bit below medium, so I might have to turn it down in just a minute. But so all we're trying to do right now is simmer these for about 5 minutes to loosen up the pulp and be able to get the seeds out. We're going to strain these. I'm just going to use the same measuring cup, and I'm going to strain them into here. Strain these to get the seeds out. We want to keep all of the pulp that we can, but any of the seeds should come out into the strainer. And there's no water in this, just, you know, FYI, it's all just juice from the grapes. So right now it's just grape pulp and juices that came out of the skins. And we're just gonna simmer it until it's starting to look, what does she say? The flesh will lose its form and some of the seeds will start to slip away willy-nilly. So that's what we're hoping will happen. I think it might take us a little bit more than 5 minutes just because some of mine were really not super ripe, and the less ripe they are, the sort of harder the flesh is. So do it for about 5 minutes and check it. So this has been going for 5 minutes. I think we're gonna let it go a little bit longer. A few of them are starting to cook, but most of them are still pretty hard. So I think at this stage, I'm gonna need a little more time. So I'll let you know how long it takes in just a minute. I've cooked this an extra 10 minutes. There are still a few that are kind of hard, but the rest are falling apart. So now I'm gonna strain it. All we're trying to strain out here is the seeds. We want all of the pulp to go through here. Now, she uses a larger colander with larger holes, and she says to use sort of medium holes. You want as much to go through as possible, and it doesn't matter how small it is. This is probably the best thing I have. My other larger colander has bigger holes, so I don't think it would work for that. So we're gonna try this. So I'm just gonna pour everything in here and just make sure I get out at least all of the seeds. Don't need to get out everything else because it's fine. We're gonna just use this pan again. And now we're going to try to push everything through the strainer. She says, you know, at least medium holes, but you know, You use what you got. So I'm gonna be doing this for a little while, and when I'm done, I'll show you what happens next. Not all of my pulp is going through, and I'm just really annoyed with it right now, so I'm gonna turn my heat back on and put everything that's in the top back in my pan and cook it a little while longer. And hopefully after that, we can get all of the pulp through here, because we want all of our pulp, we just don't want the seeds. So I'm cooking for a little bit longer until all of the pulp can go through this. I think if I had a strainer that had like a pasta strainer, like a colander that had smaller holes, kind of like hers, this is probably the best thing for this. That would let me push all of this through there, but I think the combination of my smaller holes in my strainer and the less ripe grapes is not super great for me right now. So we'll be cooking this a little bit longer. So I'm gonna call this good. I picked out some of the larger pieces and missed put in a seed. Sadly. I used a wooden spoon to try to get a little bit more through. We're just gonna have to take the loss of however much pulp we're missing here. But make sure you scrape the bottom side to get all of that pulp out. We're gonna discard the seeds. Everything else goes in here. I already put most of it in. It's really, you know, the pulp goes down pretty far, so it's not a huge amount. So now we're adding our skins back in, and you'll notice that I have some of the, what they're called bronze, they're greener grapes, and then some were the black and they're more purple Muscadine grapes. She suggests that a 2 parts green to 1 part purple, bronze, black, whatever, is a good ratio because of the difference in the flavors. But of course, whatever you have is fine. So we've got the skins in here now, and we're adding water, just a little tiny bit of water. And there's no pectin in this. I think the skins have enough in it that it'll make it set up like, you know, preserves or jelly. Not really jelly, but jam. So we're gonna bring this up to a boil and cook it for 5 minutes. This has been boiling for 5 minutes. I'm not gonna worry about boiling it longer or not, because we're not done here. Next thing we add is the sugar. Preserves always have sugar. I've already measured it. We're just gonna stir this in, and we're gonna continue to boil this for another 10 minutes at this point. It's starting to take on the purple color that she assures us we will get if we use at least, you know, 1/3 of the darker Muscadine grapes. 5 more minutes. Time to check this again. Just gonna stir it up a little bit. It's getting much more purple. It was a much lighter purple before. Now it seems like a darker purple, which is good. So I'm gonna grab my plate. A little bit. Okay, so seems slightly thicker. Let's see, she says gels up and wrinkles. I don't think we're quite there yet. All right. Super tasty though. So I'm just gonna let it go for about 3 more minutes before we test it again. I really think because some of my grapes were not super ripe, maybe the hulls are taking a little bit more time to cook down. So Then another 3 minutes. Certainly looks like it's getting thicker. The bubbles sort of get smaller and foamier. It's kind of like when you make fudge. At least that's what I like in this too. It's a very nice purple color. Let's test it. You can see that is still a little fluid, but a lot less fluid than it was at the original timing. So it kind of hangs on my finger a little bit. So I'm gonna call this done. Now, the final ingredient is some lemon juice. So we just have to add a little bit of lemon juice, freshly squeezed. Okay, that'll be fine. Just add a little bit of tartness to the pretty sweet preserves that we have going here. And we're done. So, since this only makes a pretty small amount, I really think it's going to fill this jar. So, I don't know how the original recipe could have been only 1 pint, but now I have to transfer this into here, and I don't really want to get out my jarring canister funnel. But, so you can make more, or you can put this into smaller jars and then process them. Like with any jam, there are directions in the book for canning things like this, hot water canning. And she said you would process this for 10 minutes. But we're not gonna do that. We're just gonna put it in here and it's all gonna go in the refrigerator and that will be fine. So let's see how well I can get this into the jar. Problem being, all those holes are, make it not just a single stream of jam. So there we go. And I was correct. My one recipe of this almost filled up my pint jar. So I think the full recipe would make almost 2 pints. Well, math, right? So we'll let you know what we think in just a second. Thanks to the magic of television. On this episode of Cooking the Books with Heather, you watched me make Grape-Hull preserves from Vivian Howard's Deep Run Roots cookbook. It was a really easy recipe, nothing horribly difficult about it. You didn't even need to cut the grapes up. I did feel like I needed to cook my grape innards a little bit more before I put the hulls in, because they were really hard it was really hard to push it through the strainer and get the seeds out. So that might be something that you really need to judge. Some of my grapes were really, really firm. A little unripe, and I think that made that a little bit more difficult. It'll need a little bit more cooking. In the end, when I first tried this, I felt like the jam, the preserves were a little thick, but I decided eventually that was because of the large grape hulls. Like, it was hard to get a spoon of it. And it felt like it was really thick, but it was because all of the grape hulls were sort of tangled together and it was hard to get those out. And the grape hulls were just really large. And I think that is the part that I didn't like about this recipe. I would make this recipe again, but I would definitely sort of chop those up at least roughly before I put them in to cook, because it was just not as pleasant to eat with huge pieces of the Grape-Hull, not as easy to spread, which we like a nice spreadable preserve. So those were really the only things I would do differently. The grape preserves, they tasted really good. They turned out a really beautiful purple color. I did use the ratio that she suggested of sort of 2/3 bronze to 1/3 black or purple ones. And it did turn out a beautiful color. And yeah, I think the whole family enjoyed the recipe, and it was one of the easier jam recipes because you don't have to use pectin, and it doesn't make a huge batch. It does make more than the recipe says. I think the recipe said it would make a pint. We made half a recipe and got about 3/4 of a pint maybe. Anyway, it was a lot. It seemed to be a lot more than the recipe said it would make. But yeah, I would definitely make it again. If you've never made it and you like Muscadine grapes, definitely do this and try it out, especially if you have the luxury of having your own Muscadine grapes vines. Right now, they're coming off of the vine, and they're readily available. And you might want to preserve some in a preserve for use later. If you enjoyed watching me make this, give me a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and come back and watch me make something else next week.